please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on What's Hot. I'm Shireen Bhan, and here's a look at the top stories that we are tracking for you this evening. Right at the top, in an interaction with CNBC TV18, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says consolidation of PSU banks will follow recapitalization. Adds banks have been told to cut government equity down to 52%. PSU bank stocks rallying a whopping 30% after yesterday's recap announcement. Number 2. Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari raises the bar, says he expects 10,000 kilometers of road construction orders from the NHAI this fiscal, promises to close the year with road development of at least 30 kilometers a day, seeks to raise capital through an NHAI-led bond issue to encourage retail participation in infra development. The government softens its position on Aadhaar, tells the Apex Court it can consider extension of the deadline for enrollment with Aadhaar to the 31st of March 2018. Even the Telecom Ministry relents, may not make it mandatory to link mobile phone numbers with the Aadhaar for KYC for those who are not enrolled with Aadhaar. US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson meets Prime Minister Modi, and External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj says Pakistan needs to crack down on terror and agrees to provide aid for India's military modernization. Swaraj raises the H-1B visa issue. And finally, in earnings, HUL posts a steady quarter as revenue and volume meet expectations. Kotak Mahindra Bank meets the street view. Asset quality stays stable. HCL Tech, however, disappoints due to a $20 million negative impact on its India business. But let's go straight to the big interview of the day. We had to take a major step and not a baby step to address the public sector banking concerns. That's the word in from the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley a day after the government announced a massive boost for the banking sector. Just to recap for you, the centre last evening approved a 2.11 lakh crore rupee bank recap plan. Now, the scheme includes infusion of 1.35 lakh crore rupees via a bank recap bond and 76,000 crore rupees from budgetary support and market loans. Speaking to CNBC TV18 Sapna Das today, the Finance Minister has promised more banking sector reforms in the near future. He said consolidation of PSU banks will follow recapitalization, though he added that the exercise is not bound to a timeline. The Finance Minister also said that PSU banks have been told to bring down government equity to 52%. This, as the government believes, is the right time given the fact that the markets are at record highs, and hence it might be the right time for them to divest bank shares. Take a listen.
The criteria will be fixed and will be publicly announced. There will be no discretions. Discretions will be exercised on basis of some objective criteria itself as to which are the banks which are to be supported. And therefore, you just keep sinking money into banks which produces no results is certainly not the object of the government. It has to be utilized effectively.
How do you see the resolution process panning out?
I
do you think
so
it could
far,
be a long haul?
So far, I think they're maintaining the timelines, to be fair to the NCLT and to the resolution process itself. I think it's begun well. Secondly, it's also changed the whole relationship between the debtor and the creditor. The debtor is no longer chasing the creditor with a begging bowl, please return my money. The relationship has changed. Those who default and persistently default now can be thrown out of their companies on day one.
So you also mentioned yesterday that going forward, I mean, the announcement of the recap plan could be the phase 1. Possibly in the phase 2, we will undertake further banking reforms.
You see, I think that we need to avoid the kind of situation which took place. Public sector banks, except for the fact that their equity is held in majority by the government, must function as competitive units, take decisions on commercial considerations, and discharge their obligation to the best of their ability. Now, what are the norms under which these banks are going to function? As it is, political interference in the functioning of the banks is something which we brought an end to. Professionalizing the boards, we've done a lot better than our predecessors itself. And I do hope once we announced some reforms as far as banks are concerned, on a latest, you see, I had already announced consolidation.
Absolutely, I was just going to come to that.
But consolidation, once you are going through this phase of capital induction and strengthening the banks, the consolidation exercise can come later in point of time rather than prior in point of time.
Right, sir. So, say around 4 to 6 months for things to settle down?
I'm not going to bind myself into timeline limits because let's see how it pans itself out. How the spread is to take place as far as offloading in the market is concerned, the market is quite at its boom period at the moment. And even if you have to divest some shares, this is the right time to divest. And if you are going to recapitalize the bank stocks are moving up. Therefore, this may also be the right time to divest the bank stocks.
So, right time to divest bank stocks. Perhaps not the right time for consolidation just yet, but that could also follow. Sapna also caught up with the Banking Secretary Rajiv Kumar. He told CNBC TV18 the time has come for banks to be more responsive and responsible. Take a listen.
This is now the term of the banks to be responsive and responsible. Responsive to the needs of the genuine credit, genuine entrepreneurs. That it's a hassle-free kind of a affair, that it's very pleasurable and it's hassle-free, and at the same time to be responsible for the proper assessments and the exact loaning, so that the right direction and the economic growth takes place. The entire package would be front-loaded in the sense that the capital adequacy of all the banks would be maintained, and thereafter and simultaneously this is the potential and the performance based which will be done.
The cost to the government is that when it issues these bonds, it has to pay interest on that to the banks. That, in a sense, is the true cost, and everything else is accounted. Now, is that cost worth paying? So we estimate is that, so if you have 1.35 lakh crores of these bonds, at about 7% interest, it's about 9,500 crores every year, and that's the cost of this whole operation in some sense. But it's a cost that's worth paying because by doing this, the expectation is that the critical bottleneck, the twin balance sheet challenge that faces, that can be helped.
Well, that is the CEA, Arun Subramanian. But the centre's plan to resuscitate public sector banks through a mega recapitalization plan has been welcomed by the Reserve Bank of India. In a statement, RBI Governor Urjit Patel said that well-capitalized banking and financial intermediation is a prerequisite for stable economic growth. He added that the government's decisive package to restore the health of the financial system is a monumental step forward in safeguarding the country's economic future. He said the step to recapitalize banks has been taken at a time of sound macroeconomic conditions. According to Dr. Patel's statement, recap bonds will be liquidity neutral for the government except for the interest expense. And let's talk about the markets, because the government's fillip to the economy, or attempt to give a booster dose to the economy by announcing that massive bank recap plan as well as that big infra push, had Dalal Street cheering today. So both the Sensex and the Nifty hitting new closing highs, with the former almost hitting the 10,300 mark. The Sensex rallied over 400 points today, and as expected, public sector banks led the rally, with the banking index clocking a massive 30% upsurge. The Nifty Bank also managed to breach the 25,000 mark. So good going there for the markets and for banking stocks in particular. But here's another exclusive tonight. I caught up with the Transport Minister, Nitin Gadkari, just a short while ago. Remember, he wants the pace of road construction to pick up. He's confident that all projects under the Bharatmala umbrella will be underway by the end of 2018. He also said that his ministry was looking to raise capital from both the market as well as the retail audience in the near future by issuing attractive bonds, and a final decision on the shape of that is likely to be taken in a month's time. Take a look.
NHI chairman and my secretary is always giving me this 6,500. But I am not satisfied on that.
You are not satisfied?
No, I am giving, no, you have to do 10,000. And now the way in which the power delegated to NHI, I feel that our chairman and his team is in the position that they can go up to 10,000 kilometers.
You know, we often get lost in big numbers, so 7 lakh crores, 25,000 kilometers, 84,000 kilometers, and so on and so forth. So let me, for the sake of simplicity, break this down in terms of what it is going to come down to eventually when we talk about execution on the ground on a daily basis. Currently, we're doing what? Between 24 to 30 kilometers a day. If we want to achieve the 84,000 kilometer target that you've set out as part of this scheme that the cabinet has approved, it means doing 40 plus kilometers every day. You believe that that is doable, that's achievable?
First of all, I am not talking about 84,000 kilometers. Never I commit about this target.
Right.
But I will assure you one thing. At the end of March for this year, we will be, as long as we will complete the target of 30 kilometers per day, more than that.
Okay.
I am trying for that.
Okay.
Last year, it was 23 kilometers per day. And the next year, 100% I am confident we will be more than 40 kilometers per day.
To achieve that target, what about the funding? When we talk about this almost 7 lakh crore rupees now, you know, it's about 1.41 lakh crore rupees. That's the budgetary support that...
First, we have already tendered the first project of TOT of 6,000 crores is in tender. So we have the project where we get more than 1,25,000 crores. There are a lot of projects are with us now.
That's what you hope to monetize on the TOT side. Yeah.
The third thing is we have already government has given permission to raise the 70,000 crore from the market. Out of we just 15 to 16,000 crore we raise, 3,000 crore in London Stock Exchange, 8,000 crore LIC. And now I am confident that there is no problem, we can raise it from Indian market. NHI's rating is AAA. At the same time, we have a lot of offers from pension fund, insurance fund, foreign investors. But now my feeling is, in such an economic situation, for the construction of road construction in the country, we should encourage the investment from the common man. So my idea is we can give them 1 to 1.5% more interest than banks.
Okay.
And we can go for bonds. And now we have appointed a consultant.
So NHAI bonds?
Yes, but NHAI is the authority.
Yes.
So that's why we appointed a financial consultant by which we can make a special vehicle which is guaranteed by NHAI. We will go for capital market. We raise the fund from the common people and after their retirement, 10 years, 15 years, we will give them interest.
So bank recap bonds and loosely infrastructure bonds, that's what the government is planning. That's the Road and Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari expecting to take a decision on those bonds within a month's time. Up next, US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson meets Prime Minister Modi and External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj. We decode that meeting when we return. US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is in India on his first official visit and has had a packed schedule. He first met National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, then External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj. In a joint press conference, Sushma Swaraj said she discussed the important contribution of Indians working in the US on the H-1B visa issue. Rex Tillerson and Sushma Swaraj have agreed to fight terrorism and strengthen the India-US partnership. Tillerson also said that America will not tolerate safe havens of terror. The Secretary of State also said that India is crucial to the US's Afghanistan strategy and that he's looking forward to discussing the F-16 and the F-18 fighter jet deal. Tillerson met Prime Minister Modi, where again terrorism was one of the key items discussed, along with enhancing the pace and scope of Indo-US bilateral ties. Well, to discuss the importance of this visit, we're now joined by Shailesh Kumar, Senior Analyst Asia at the Euro-Asia Group. Shailesh, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. You know, we heard from Secretary of State Tillerson before he arrived in India, and today at that joint press conference with the Minister of External Affairs, Sushma Swaraj, a lot of the conversation was around the issue of Pakistan, with Tillerson saying that he had a very frank and open conversation with leaders in Islamabad, conveying the expectations that the US has with Pakistan, also adding that the US wants to work with Pakistan in a positive way, as they believe that that is in their long-term interest. So when we talk about the US-India-Pakistan equation, how significant are the comments that have come in and this visit in particular?
Sure, thanks for having me. The visit is very noteworthy. I think what Tillerson may have said in Pakistan is very diplomatic. It's what he has to say. I mean, he can't go to Pakistan and be overly aggressive or negative towards the leadership. So he has to say what he had to say. But I think when you look at what U.S.'s approach to the region has been, we have to look further back. For example, the new strategy for South Asia that was unveiled in August, the overall comments that have been coming from this government in the U.S. towards the region. I think the most important thing is that there has been a massive shift in U.S. foreign policy. It's one that sees Pakistan as a potential sponsor of terror. America hasn't officially designated it that. I think a full designation may not ever happen, and if it does, it's a long ways out. But they're beginning to see the region more from India's perspective, and I think that's a huge change, particularly if you think about the 1980s, for example, just 30 years ago. U.S. approach to Afghanistan was very much aligned with Pakistan. They did not want Indian involvement. They did not want India's input in terms of how Afghanistan should be shaped. And now it's the exact opposite, where the U.S. wants India to take a leadership role in Afghanistan, to have a bigger say in how the governance structure should be maintained. And they want Pakistan to have a smaller footprint. So it's been a 180 in terms of foreign policy. I think when it comes to terrorism, what Tillerson said before the trip is even more noteworthy. What he said on the trip is also noteworthy, obviously, which is that, again, America is seeing terrorism in South Asia from the prism of India's perspective. And this is a big title change, a big shift in terms of how America is viewing India and its concerns with Pakistan.
Let me move beyond Pakistan and talk to you about how America is viewing India in the context of China, Shailesh. We're speaking in the context of where Xi Jinping has, the succession has now been done. How do you see the new equation between the U.S. And Indian administration in the context of China?
So I think, again, going back to Tillerson's speech, he made a speech last week here in Washington, D.C., and there's always been a suspicion in many quarters that America's interests in India are primarily to build up India as a hedge against China. And that's been kind of more of the conspiracy theory view as to why America is interested in India. Tillerson, in some ways, articulated that they want to see India rise as a counterweight to China. He didn't use those exact words, but if you read between the lines, he did say that India and China have risen, but India's risen in a more responsible manner. And that's pretty alarming words, or pretty strong words from a U.S. government to say. So in terms of what this means or how U.S. views India and vis-a-vis China, I think it's pretty obvious that America wants India to be the regional power. Now, that doesn't mean the Asian power. That doesn't mean that they're looking towards India to dominate China in any way. But they do want India to be a regional power within South Asia. That, again, is a big change from the past when America wanted a balance of power in South Asia between India and Pakistan. But then, again, by being a regional power, that inevitably makes India a counterweight to China. One way or another, that's what ends up happening. I think I think U.S. is watching China's rise very closely, and they do see an ally in India as a counterweight to this.
Well, moving beyond that to talk about the bilateral engagement between the U.S. And India, Shailesh, Tillerson talking about the F-16 and F-18 fighter jet deals, that is up for discussion. Sushma Swaraj bringing up the H-1B issue. On the bilateral trade and investment front, where do you see this partnership headed now?
So, Shireen, I think on investment and trade, unfortunately, there's not much progress, and that's because the bilateral investment treaty on the Indian side has been stuck. It hasn't really advanced. But that doesn't necessarily mean that investments, period, aren't doing well. I mean, U.S. investments in India are doing quite well. Overall foreign direct investments in India are at record highs. So I think absent a bilateral investment trade treaty or absent a direct push by other government, the investment and trade cycle will be okay. On the F-16 point, though, one of the challenges from the U.S. side is if you take a look at most countries that buy U.S. defense equipment, the procurement process is G to G, where the government decides they want to buy a U.S. weapon system and then they directly buy it. With India, the process is different. There is a procurement process. It's not G to G always. I mean, it ends up being G to G, but there is a process in terms of how contracts are reviewed or awarded. And that becomes a little bit of a challenge in terms of using defense policy to further foreign policy. And an F-16 deal or an F-18 deal between the U.S. and India would really cement the relationship further. And I think the U.S. views it from that perspective as well. The challenge is, how does the Indian defense establishment agree to buy a system for those purposes? And that's kind of where the friction lies.
And we haven't seen any forward movement on the RFP from India just yet. But Shailesh, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks very much for joining us to make sense of Rex Tillerson's India visit and its implications. But on to the other big story coming in this evening. With mounting legal pressure in the apex court, the government seems to have relaxed its position on the use and enrolment with Aadhaar. The government informed the apex court that it could extend the deadline for the enrolment to the 31st of March 2018. Meanwhile, the telecom department, after having made linking of Aadhaar with telcos compulsory, has now begun to look at alternatives like passport and driver's license. Ashmit joins us now with the lowdown. So Ashmit, what exactly has changed as of today?
Well, two key things to watch out for. As you correctly pointed out, the first thing to watch out for was, of course, the proceedings before the apex court. The Supreme Court hearing the applications that have challenged the linkage of Aadhaar with telcos as well as with bank accounts. Now, while hearing those applications, interestingly, the government made two key concessions actually. The first one being that at least as far as these concerns have been raised, to that extent, the Attorney General said that the government could consider an extension of the deadline. Mind you, if it does, this would be the second time the deadline was extended. The current deadline is 31st of deadline. The government may be considering it, pushing it off by another 3 months. That's the first key concession. On the second key aspect of whether or not Aadhaar, people who have enrolled with Aadhaar, can Aadhaar be made mandatory for them? Instead of an outright defense, the Attorney General said that perhaps he needs to seek instructions on that matter. So that big question mark still looms. That matter will come up on Monday, that's October 30th. That's the first part of the story. The second part is, keep in mind, the telecom department, by way of a circular, the DOT had made linkage of Aadhaar mandatory with telcos. So that necessarily meant that irrespective of whether or not you've enrolled, you will have to link your Aadhaar with the telecom number, with your mobile number. Now there appears to be a rethink. The government, what sources tell us, is that the DOT is now actively looking at other forms of identification, such as a passport, such as a driver's license, such as a ration card, which are again official IDs and can be used as KYC. But that, of course, only for people who are yet to enroll. So the government clearly doing a rethink. We will have to see till Monday whether or not the government states a new position before the apex court.
All right, Ashmit, thanks very much for explaining that to us. It's time now for us to shift our focus to the earnings of the day. FMCG giant Hindustan Unilever reporting its second quarter results. The company has beaten street expectations on the profit front, coming in at 1,200 crore rupees. Revenues up 6% year-on-year at 8,300 crores. Volume growth also in line with street estimates at 4%. But the disappointment was on HCL Tech's second quarter performance. While revenues failed to meet street expectations, profit, which was up only 0.8% to the last quarter, managed to meet street view. The company stayed the course on its guidance, maintaining its FY18 revenue growth forecast at between 10.5 to 12.5% in constant currency terms. And a healthy quarter for Kotak Mahindra Bank. The company's numbers beat estimates on all fronts. Standalone net profit coming in at over 990 crores. Meeting estimates, asset quality improved on a quarterly basis as both net and gross NPAs better than last quarter. The big national story after 2 weeks of suspense, the Election Commission today announcing that Gujarat polls will be held in 2 phases starting the 9th of December. Then the second phase on the 14th of December. 89 constituencies will be polled in the first phase, while the remaining 93 constituencies will vote on the 14th of December. The results of the Gujarat and Himachal polls will be announced on December 18th. Election Commissioner Achal Jyoti today said the maximum expenditure allowed for each candidate has been capped at 28 lakh rupees. 2 interesting developments. The height of the voting compartment has been increased from 24 to 30 inches to maintain secrecy of voting. Also, of the total 50,128 polling stations in Gujarat, 102 will be manned entirely by women. So Gujarat and Himachal go to the polls. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of What's Hot. Up next, our exclusive interview with the Road and Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari on the big infra push. Ambitious targets being set. How does he intend to meet them? That and more when we return. I'll see you again in 30 minutes on India Business Hour.